Good morning, traders. Welcome to Tuesday of this beautiful week. Make sure to swing over to ssftg.com/brief to grab your morning brief levels. Before we jump on in, we always want to make sure that we know what's going on and when, and the best way to do that is take a look at the news, right? We got to see what's going on from the news side of things. So on the news calendar earlier this morning, we had some 1:30 news from investing.com. They rank it as a medium news announcement. I feel like that might be a little bit self-inflated, but it doesn't really tend to have much of an impact on the markets. At 8:30, the core retail sales for today forecast is 0.6%. The previous was 1.5%. Also at 8:30, we have the retail sales for October that's forecasted at 0.5%. The previous was 1.9%. And those are some of the only big news announcements that we have for the week, really. If we go a little bit later at 9:15, we have the industrial production. Those are medium numbers. 10 o'clock business inventories. Again, those are medium numbers. And then things start getting a little bit weird, right? Because now we go into 12 o'clock and then all of a sudden all of these speakers start hitting. So FOMC member Bostic is speaking at 12 o'clock. FOMC member Daly speaking at 12 o'clock. At 1400, member Williams is speaking and member Bostic at 1435. At 1450, member Daly speaking again. So there's a lot of FOMC action going on today at around noon going into the afternoon. Aside from that, looking at some of the other news announcements, we have the API weekly crude oil stocks that comes out every Tuesday. It gives us a little bit of an idea of what to expect for the inventories going into tomorrow, but that's really about it. So for the news calendar today, realistically looking at news at 8:30 and then maybe a little bit of wiggle at 10 o'clock and then probably laying off the gas pedal going into lunchtime with all of those members speaking. So let's jump in for today, 11/17 of 2020. All right, so first up on the list is going to be the NASDAQ. Now, as far as the NASDAQ goes, when we're kind of seeing this sideways action, yesterday looked like it was going to potentially end up closing as a doji. We had the big open here, and after that gigantic rally to the upside, it flushed all the way back down. Really looked like it was going to hover around there for a while before lifting back to the upside. And closing relatively strong. If we look at that as a daily candle, right, that was the open and that was the close. That's the body of the candle. And above that, realistically, the wick really didn't go much and all of the wick was at the bottom. So with a little bit of candle math, we can see it's a fairly bullish move to the upside, and the buyers are triggering above that. So looking for a little bit more movement up. We've only just initially triggered above it. And it does appear as though maybe buyers are trying to round off the bottom a little bit. But as it stands, with the market kind of chopping around and going sideways so far this morning, might make a little bit more sense just to look for lower prices. The rising wedge support is lining up really nicely with right around that S1 and all of those swing lows kind of clustering together for a big zone of interest there. If it wants to dip down there, I mean, again, with this kind of back and forth we've got going on, this might end up being a bear channel to the downside, but it's still smack in the middle of everything. It's tough to really want to do much on the NASDAQ at the moment until we can get down towards broader levels of support, and that's not going to happen until around those 11,950s. If the market does want to go back up towards the highs, then we're obviously going to have to pay attention to the rising resistance above. That's going to be up at the 12,100s, and 12,000 in general is probably going to be a bit messy today anyway. So the NASDAQ, you know, normally it's one of my favorite markets, but man, it's getting a little bit tough up here. It's got to find some better price action and get out of this. Over on the S&P, a very similar situation to the NASDAQ in that it is going relatively sideways. But again, if we look at the comparison-wise from the NASDAQ to the S&P, we continue to see the S&P showing a lot more strength. Yesterday's daily bar is basically just a big brick, and it never did trigger above the highs, and that's a pretty big clue. So far for the S&P, it's an inside day. We're hovering inside of that breakout point. If they can start breaking above the previous high of day, then that means on the daily candle, the buyers begin getting triggered into the upside. Looking where price is at the moment, it's obviously going very sideways if we kind of expand this out a little bit. It's just a range, and every time it dips down to the lows, it seems like buyers are picking it up, but every time it makes its way up to the highs, it's having some trouble there too. More recently, we haven't really had any breakout one way or the other. They broke out high and then broke out low and kind of got a double bottom, and that's about it. It's just been inside of that ever since, creating this bit of a wedge that we've got going on at the moment too. Potentially at the bottom of that, but if it does want to break out just a little bit lower, it wouldn't hurt my feelings to see them get down towards the channel lows where the rest of the support starts coming in for buyers to pressure the market back up. Swinging over to gold next, and not much has really changed here on gold. It really hasn't done a whole lot, all things considered, just kind of chopping around, going sideways, not really doing much. Now, we did just recently make a quick, really nasty, if you zoom in real close, you can see that did make a lower low. So they made a quick little lower low trap before reversing back up towards the highs. The highs of the channel start holding as resistance, but at the same time, we're also seeing the pivot point and support holding down here as well. So we're in a little bit of a fight with this big whip back and forth. Obviously, the big high and low of that area, that's going to be the big zone of interest, and that's right where we're stuck at. If it does want to go back down, then we have the lows of that giant giant bear bar, rather. But that's where we're getting stuck, and it's not really much of a coincidence, the fact that the market's getting stuck here. It's the top of that big bear bar, and if we draw that forward, this is the zone that we were talking about yesterday that's going to act as a level of resistance or support. As long as we're staying underneath that, then realistically the sellers are winning the fight. If the buyers can break above that, you can see how that kind of is creating a shelf right now, because all of that price action is kind of getting stuffed up around that same spot. And if it breaks out above that, right, there's a lot of open room for that to start running, which is sort of what this is looking like on gold. So if we can get this breakdown, it's a big wide open door down to the 1866s, 64s. But as it stands, buyers are still trying to hold on up here. If they start losing their grip below the 83s, 82s, then it might just be game over for them. Then over to crude oil, which is forming a relatively nice looking potential bear channel. And I say potential bear channel because realistically we haven't proven it. We've only got 3 points, right? We've got point 1, 2, and then 3. We need that fourth confirming point, which is sort of what it's waiting for. That said, with this potential move up, it's creating a bit of a wedge. So we do have a nice little wedge breakout, which you can kind of see coming in there. You could also draw it like that. Either way, we've got a nice little wedge breakout. They have a breakout pullback, and sellers are trying to get this to move down. At the moment, it seems like we're running into a lot of support here. We've got pivot point support, we've got previous major swing support, previous major swing high support, was resistance, now support at least. Everything's kind of bunched up here. So if the sellers are going to crack through this, really going to have to see them drive underneath the 4120s, 4115s. And then the problem is 41's right there. Whole dollars certainly don't help the equation, and if we go a little bit below that, then we've got the channel lows. So they've got a little bit of open space between 41 and the channel lows, but it's still not going to be much, and it's going to be relatively tight. The big thing that I think a lot of traders are waiting for is, if it is going to break down, how aggressively is it going to do it? Is it going to be so aggressive that we start creating a new trend? Or is it just going to be a lazy grind lower where it just keeps up this weak, bearish kind of trend, right? That's a technical term. So that's kind of the big question that we're waiting for. Now, the other thing that kind of stands out is a potential of a wedge in the nearer term, which is forming right now. It looks like buyers and sellers are trying to get a fist fight over it. Sellers are trying to get the initial breakdown, and that would add that extra little layer of context to what's going on here. We just have to wait to see which way they want to go. Over in the currency world, on the euro here, we've got a good continuation move to the upside back towards the channel highs, and buyers did end up buying that move, right? There was kind of a concern with this big move down. Are they going to hold the lower high? Which way are they going to go? We do end up seeing a continuation move. So with that breakout to the upside, we're breaking a new high, right? So not only are we making 2 legs up, it could also be 2 legs up here, to be fair. It's also breaking a new major structural swing high. So this is a continuation of the trend. We've got higher highs, higher lows, and everything's still kind of pushing to the upside. It looks good. Obviously, the problem is now we're way up towards the target area. So any buyers who are interested, well, it's going to be a little bit tough for them to want to be interested way up here. There's not really any room anymore. So where it stands location-wise, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do much up here. Longs will be taking profit. Otherwise, it's more of waiting for a pullback or some better conviction. If the market wants to break through the highs, might find some resistance up there on an overshoot if they overextend above the top towards that 1.19 and then see if they want to reverse it off of that. Realistically, though, buyers are just going to be waiting for the pullback, and below that previous swing at around 185 looks like a really nice zone of interest for buyers to come back in again. And then finally, on the cryptocurrency side of things, we've got Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is continuing its very strong rally to the upside. We had that original breakout move all the way back up, and after that breakout move, it looked like it might have been getting a little overextended. And usually when a market gets overextended, you expect to see it pull back just about as much, right? So if you have an upward channel that looks something like this, and it overextends by this distance, and you'd expect it to overextend the other side by that distance. In this case, though, we had that continuation to the upside, but when they created the channel, it sort of created a multi-tiered channel. It respected the same area just a little bit further up. So instead of it really pulling back, it more just kind of went sideways. A little bit of a consolidated range into the 16,600s, where we're breaking out of wedge resistance, falling resistance, etc., and that's allowing buyers to come back in again. They've already had the original wedge break. Now we've got kind of a secondary wedge break coming across here that's looking to complete for even more continuation. So buyers are still looking really strong, and it wouldn't be a surprise at all to see new highs, maybe even 17,000s plus today, if Bitcoin can stay above the top of this wedge. If the buyers fail this rally higher, then we might be looking at a false high into a move down, and that would be likely a move down towards the 16,500s first on the pivot point. And then if they want to pull back a little bit further, maybe we start seeing them pull back a little bit deeper towards S1, and then we've got those dips down towards 16,120, and then that zone would become the next area of interest. It all depends on how they want to play it out up here. Either way, the longs are interested. It's just a matter of how deep it's going to go first. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. Stay safe out there, keep those stops in play, and let those winners run. I hope you have a great trading day today, and we will see you all tomorrow. Thanks.